Welcome to camp. Welcome to Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Urban Talks. This edition is focused on foreign architects and abroad experience, all about architecture, urbanism, landscape architecture, etc. Today you will have a chance to meet three studios, three projects. You will meet their architects, partners and founders. You will also have a chance to ask questions and discuss their projects. So after the three lectures that are ahead of us, you will have a chance to raise your hand. We will give you a mic and you can ask a question, and if you prefer to write the question online, you can use slido.com. If you use hashtag Urban Talks, you will reach my iPad and I will read your question. It's very easy. Welcome to camp. If you're watching us through live stream, you can ask questions too. And first presentation, first lecture will be from Marc Frohn from FAR Frohn&Rojas. Where is Marc? Here. Welcome to camp. You can start.
All right. Can you hear me? All right, perfect. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. I'll get started right away. 2 sentences on the office before I show the one and a half projects. The office is founded by Mario Rojas and myself, and we work half in Germany and half in Latin America and Chile, actually. I'm going to present a specific project as the focus is, as I understood, on housing, and I'm going to present a project called Wohnregal in Berlin. And it's a project also that we initiated in a sense and also partially developed. And it started off with like how to find a site in a city where in the recent years nothing has been affordable in terms of land. And we started to, and you see that on the Google map marked, basically go along the S-Bahn, the public transport ring, and look for properties that are kind of outside the center of things. Finally ended up in our curiosity finding one pretty much in the center of the city, but that was the odds that were not supposed to happen. So we identified 300 plus lots in the course of 2 years and wrote to the owners and finally found something that was not on the market. And there's like something that interested us about prefabricated housing or prefabricated construction, and we tried to address 2 things with it that seemed contradictory to one another. The one is, how do you build very cheaply? That's one thing that people would potentially connect to the idea of prefabrication. And the other thing is, though, how do you create the biggest possible variety of different ways of living? Because normally you think of prefabrication as standardization and therefore a uniform plan that is being repeated, optimized, and repeated. That's the history of it. So how could we escape from that? And I think the answer for us was actually finding a building system that's been around for decades, one for industrial construction, which you can see right here. And as it explodes, these are actually the parts of it. And the interesting part about it is that actually the structure is all on the outside, and it spans through the whole depth of the building. And so on the inside, you can do whatever you want. I'll address it a little further. So that's the model of the structure, actually. And that is a model of the pieces of one floor. So you can get a sense these are prefabricated concrete pieces, that was as they first were delivered on site. So we have an inner city site, closing a block situation in Berlin. You can see these pieces, and those pieces are usually used to build industrial sites or logistics stations. Actually, the recent construction of the Tesla factory outside Berlin, same pieces, same company. I mean, not architects, but construction company. We wish. So now you get a sense, it's very simple. It's columns, beams, and the so-called TT ceilings. Now I need to know a new button here. Yeah, this one. So they have these downstands, and they allow the structure to actually span very economically over a long distance of like 12, 13, or whatever meters. But you can also see it's pretty rough. It's very basic. It's not architectural concrete, but it's engineering kind of grade concrete. And that's how you see how actually these pieces are made. Many of these factories have been around in the East German history, outside Berlin, and they've been building for decades, during socialist times, prefabricated housing, and then they were respec and kind of did industrial work. So that's the key part, the so-called TT ceiling. It spans through the whole kind of depth of the building. And actually, so on every floor, we could do then completely different plans. The only thing they had to have in common is the mechanical cores, where the toilets and the bathrooms connect. But so one floor is like this, another is like this, next one like that. And once you overlap, this is actually what normally you wouldn't ever do when you think rationally or economically about a construction. Basically, you have the overlap of all the different kind of floor plans and it's kind of an unfold, inner facade, floor, and the RCP, the reflected ceiling plan. So, if you look carefully, you see that at the two mechanical cores, they kind of meet, but other than that, they can do what they want. So 6 floors, 12 different units, or actually the ground floor is 1, so 11 different units, so nothing needs to meet. And that's the idea of this kind of strict hierarchy. The Wohnregal means there's a big shelf, which is the precast concrete construction, and within that shelf you put in what you want as a drywall construction. So you get a sense here as it sits in the city, and next to the precast concrete construction, there is this kind of facade of large-scale sliding doors and windows, and during the summer months, which are hopefully soon starting, you get a sense you can completely open the flat, so it's basically almost living in a large loggia on the back side. And the north-facing facade is the cold part of the building, so it's it's exposed to the weather, staircase, elevator, and each unit has a little loggia sticking to it. So I go briefly through a couple of interior shots, and you get a sense then how some of these different units kind of look. As they were, it's a rental. These are rental units, so you see how here's the frontal, like in another setup. You get a sense all of these photos, because they have a strong directionality, these spaces through these beams that span all around. You get a sense that even though kind of we're literally just moving floor to floor, but they're kind of set up and organized very differently from one another. And then here you see these these large sliding doors and the balustrade, and so this part completely opens up, and in the summer it's quite nice. You're in the trees, you're outdoors almost. Now, what you've seen so far, these are the usual architect's photos. White walls, some concrete, maybe timber on a good day. But actually, how are they actually inhabited? So 3 years after we finished, so it was finished in 19. So in 22, we asked several of the inhabitants, of the renters, if they would allow for their flats to be documented. So to get a sense, is there actually that breadth of the way they're occupied? And you get a sense, I'm not going to comment further on them, but you get a sense of the different apartments as they're actually being inhabited. And for us, it was also like a proof of concept in the sense of what does it actually mean to inhabit a raw industrial structure? How homely does it actually get? Or does the idea actually carry? Or is there a problem with it? So then there's one other aspect I'm confused about the time. It always stays at 19 minutes. Okay, either I'm super fast or we'll see. There's something about the seriality that I haven't mentioned, which is obvious. It's like, you don't design a single building, but you develop a system, an idea, an approach. You invest a lot of time, a lot of knowledge that you gain, and then you also hope that within comes the opportunity to actually work with that system more than once, maybe repeatedly if you're really lucky, and maybe also on a different scale. In that case, we were lucky, not only because that someone approached us actually to take on that system and build with it again on a larger scale, but there was something particularly interesting that the Wohnregal actually developed kind of an offspring that was bigger, but that was also in a very interesting setting, because it was set in one of these early 80s East Berlin housing estates. it basically is pre-construction of a different era. It's like meeting your architectural grandparents. And so you're confronted, and it's like something probably, if, you know, in the surroundings of Prague, we will see also many of those. It is actually, as I say, you're meeting your architectural grandparents, but it's also in a good family. There is some resemblance, but there's also some way you differ. If there's nothing you differ, then there's an issue. You know, you should move away. And so it became clear to us to also point out, like, where do we go along? Where do we have a lineage that we continue, and where do we actually set ourselves apart? And I think the idea of, you know, that you see in some of the surroundings. So this is the surrounding of ours. You know, it's all prefab. I mean, these are, you can see it quite well. In German, you call it Plattenbau, and Platte basically means a plate. And the name gives it away because the plate, you can see the grid. These are all precast pieces, but basically the prefabrication also means you prefabricate the space making. You know, so basically you prefabricate walls. And so by assembling the walls, you always get the same plans. And that's the idea. The idea was to optimize a plan and repeat it to the nth degree to total architectural death, ultimately. And so, you know, we have a skeleton structure, and the idea is you repeat and you kind of systematize, but you actually, the space making happens on a different level. It's not through the prefabrication. And so it was interesting, or it is interesting because it's under construction right now, in that setting to actually, you know, to kind of see these two worlds and these two ideas of prefabrication next to one another. And I mean, I assume there's something similar here, but in Germany, you know, there's prejudice towards pre-construction in a way, you know, through a kind of historical setting of that sort. You see again the pieces, and in this case, you know, we have a base piece where there's like a parking and or, you know, mobility and all these kinds of things, and on top of that, there is, as you move up, there's 2 rows of housing, and you can get a sense. I mean, here, while the first building, the Wohnregal I showed you, has one frontal circulation, here you have a gallery circulation with private balconies facing one another. And then you have the units all being poked through with daylight from both ends. And so let's see how I click on here. Oh, yeah. So now to counter the previous idea, or something that is actually set in many mindsets, like about prefabrication being basically you have one fits all kind of unit. The idea again is like to maximize, so you have a very kind of basically repetitive structure of 1,000+ pieces, you know, of concrete, but ultimately you have more than 50 different types of units. There's a large degree of variation with a very simple kind of set of, you know, these are the cores, this is the main structure, and within it a maximum degree of variation. That was the premise that we set to ourselves. So here you get an idea of, as you know, as it was first, or as it was visualized. And so you have these 2 rows, you know, 2 gallery circulations. You have the 2, are they weirdly distorted? No, it's just my perspective here. Okay. Sorry. So you have these balconies facing one another, and as you're suddenly, it's a very strange thing, because like these large housing estates from the early 80s, they're large green spaces. Sometimes you lose it. I mean, you kind of literally wonder where the urbanism is. This one actually is a quite interesting one. It has a very classical urbanism with a big green axis, and like we're sitting at a very interesting point within that. But actually, as you kind of densify these areas, suddenly, like, where do you take, you know, what is your sense of how dense you can get, you know, suddenly, you know, in this large scale, on the one hand, it's large scale, there's a certain brutality to it, and suddenly you have, like, you know, you move very close to one another. And we took, you know, because there is very different, it was very different to find the right scale in that. We kind of approach, like, these are the traditional Berlin end of the 19th century housing streetscapes. We know their width, we know their heights, and we all know how comfortable or not comfortable they feel. So this is literally the same proportions as we built. You see it from, you know, facing it. So you see the precast elements right here as they poke through, insulation surrounding them, and then the balcony plates on top of them. And you have the outside facade, and you will recognize the sliding windows, only with a slightly lesser degree of glazing. And then I'll finish up with these 2 last slides. as it is under construction on a Berlin winter day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Topic prefabrication is very actual here, Czech Republic, so I hope we will discuss it after. And now I would like to give the floor to Colin Reynier from Data Architects. Welcome to camp, and his team, of course. Yeah.
First, we would like to thank you for the invitation. We are very happy to be here and to share this moment with you. We do also appreciate to talk with the other invited, where we have a lot of respect and admiration. Your presentation was really interesting. So I try to explain you our works and the project of RATP housing in Paris. As you can hear, my English is not so good. I need help, probably. And this is the reason why Laure and Willem are here. The second point is I like when the architect who work on a project speak about the project. For me, it's really important. So we decided to talk about two main things that are, I found my agency in 2010 in Paris with Léonard Lassagne, and our agency work on many kind of building. So we decided to talk about two main things. First, of our practice history, who we are, when we are from, and what could resume our work in theoretical terms. Secondly, how we understand the question of history with the question of heritage and way to transform existing building. Because my agency work principally on existing building in France and in Paris. So we can probably say that we've been strongly influenced by architect and designer of the 60s and the 70s, and also by the French famous architect Christian Ovet. I don't know if it's a famous architect in Czechia, but in France it's a famous architect. We worked for him for several years just after school. So what we like in this past time, it's probably that kind of optimism and faith in a better future. Even if we know if we won't probably be the case, so much things go wrong, we still hope that tomorrow could be better than today. So we choose 5 quotes from this teacher of master, establishing a philosophy of our approach. So you can see some project we work. This is a cultural project in Paris, a little project for the CEMAPA. Another project we just finished in Meudon, it's close to Paris. It's a cultural project for Art Explorer, it's a foundation for art. We just opened this building 1 month ago. It's a work on a project, a patrimonial project. So it was really difficult because there is many protection on this building, and we need to create a new facade with a large door to open the gallery to the garden. Another project in Paris, it's a transformation of an existing building near Gare de Lyon in an office. It was a really important project in Paris. Another project, we transform a patrimonial building in the center of Paris and we create new office, and we combine architecture, new architecture, and new design for this project. This project is a new project we developed now. It's a transformation of Pavillon l'Arsenal. Pavillon l'Arsenal is like this building. It's like camp So it's for French architect. It's like it's really important. So each French architect critiqued at the end my work. So it's this is another approach. Prefabricate. It's at housing in Porte de la Chapelle. We developed this project with Armand Nová, another French architect. So it's housing too, and we have a view on Paris. Another project inside Paris, in protected area, Le Marais, and we create a commercial area for Groupe Galeries Lafayette. It was before the crisis, because now you can't work with Galeries Lafayette. They do nothing, they finish. So now we speak about this project, RATP Housing. This project is close to Place d'Italie. You can see, just look. We work on this building. During the competition, there is 4 teams, and we have the choice to decide to destroy or to conserve him. And we decide during the competition to conserve the building. So I say to the other company, the other architect, today I don't know if I choose the same thing, because it was really complex, but now it's finished, so I'm happy. The difficulty is to combine 2 things. We need to create office for RATP and to create houses for RATP workers. The real difficulty is we need to create 50% area more for this project, and we need to conserve exactly the same rate, 5%. So it was our challenge. So this is the existing building I think it was a good building. So this is a plan, so it's really simple. You have a column, you have a facade, really simple building with up. And the other difficulty is you are near an industrial context, because RATP repair all the train for the line 6. So it was a construction with this here. You have the rail, and you need to build the building, and the train are all the time here. So it was not really simple. So as you see, the project of RATP is to remove this part and to transform this building. And so they create a new hangar for repair the train, and to create 52 houses for their workers. And in the basement, we create a program for office for the line 6, because all the trains go inside the subway, and after they go to Paris for the station. So this is a building, so existing building, and look, so here this is the volume of the existing building and what we create. So here we add 2 additional levels on the existing structure. The second thing is to create a winter garden on industrial site to protect all the houses for the problem of train, of noises, many things. Up. Another extension on the seat, on this part. And this is a section. So here you have all the technical office for the line 6, and here you have all the new houses for the RATP. The problem is we have 2 clients. It's the same group, but we have 2 clients, and they don't speak together. So here we have a limit. So every columns, every pipes are stopped here, and we just have a negotiation to have a connection for the ground floor for the houses. So it was really complex to have one building with 2 clients with two different opinions, with two different targets. So this is a picture during the construction. As you can see, we have a steel structure. So the existing structure is in concrete, and we add a steel structure to create the new additional level and this part for the winter garden. So in a picture from Paris. So new picture near the maintenance station. And so this is a question about the rates. So as you can see, the columns are really, really thin. So it was all the time our difficulty, because we need to have a really, really thin for each element. Columns are more really thin, and the ground and the floor are really thin too. Everything is in metal. So you have this photography. You have a contrast: existing building and the new building. So this is the building before, and this is now the building today. So I don't know if it's better, but today everybody are really enjoyed to be here. So Willem speak about the facade.
Merci, Colin. The apartments in Paris, they are not big compared to other cities, but what make them cool is the view. So what we wanted, because we don't have any restrictions in term of structure, because our structure is based on columns and beams. We decided to make these kind of stripes of windows, and thanks to this concrete parapet, you can even make some kitchen here, and you can enjoy the view during you cleaning your dishes or cooking and stuff like that. In our project, in upper part, you have a housing and control room, as Colin mentioned, and so the intersection of these two programs, it's in ground floor. So in ground floor, basically, you can see here the kind of the pockets which allows us to enter to apartments, and the rest of the buildings, it's the offices. This is also the topic that Colin already mentioned, that we have the problem with the project was how we coordinate all these like technical installations. So we have like technical voids between ground floor and first floor, where we have all the technical like all these pipes, all the pipes and stuff like that. This is the control room. Maybe you know it from the movies. Basically, this is the room where you have a screen everywhere, and the people they are watching the CCTV records. And so the restriction for this kind of room was that you cannot have any columns in the room. So that's why we built this kind of huge beam, like a steel beam, which allows us to avoid the columns in the room. This is the entrance of the apartments. We try to make it cozy with some artist interventions. Here we can see the winter gardens with always the kitchens integrated between them, and the terrace. And the terraces on the other side in the upper floors. And now I will speak to Laura about the disposition of the housing of the.
So a few words on the quality of housings. So as we said before, we added winter gardens and kitchen on one side of the building to protect the existing building from the industrial site. Thanks to this addition, living rooms are extended to the front, to the facade. So we have this feeling of a larger room. And it also protects the bedrooms from the noise and from what's happening on the industrial area. So this winter garden is unheated space, but it plays the role of thermal and acoustic protection for the bedrooms and for the housings in general. It also allows a different type of distribution through the facade or along the facade, which we can call the French corridor. So it's like some typical distribution in castle, for example, in France. So another important stuff to say about the process of transformation is that in general, when you build a new building, it's more the building who is built around the program. And in this case, and in transformation cases in general, it's more the programs who will adapt to the building. So it leads to two things. First, it leads to some discussion with the client because, of course, you have to adapt. So the program will adapt, and you can't really do the perfect, or not, I would not say the perfect, but you can't really answer to the program, because if someone asks you to do like this Parisian flat, which are quite small, then sometimes you have to add few square meters to this to make it work inside an existing building. So here we can see the example of what I said about the double facade, like the winter garden. So the distribution in the facade leading to this external or middle external space. So the rooms are protected from like the industrial building on one side, and they are lighted in second facade, but still you feel like you have a more space. And also, as we said before, we worked on this facade, so we had a glazed band all around the building, so we can see really like through Paris and through this view, which is kind of amazing from this building, and this is a really particular situation. So the fact that we have to adapt the program to the building leads also to variation in a typological subject. So here we see like a random like flats from the building. So the richness of this is, of course, it's like you have several typologies, so like cross typology in the corner or mono-oriented, but with terraces or with this winter garden. But it's we can also use the existing building to have variation of ceiling heights. So for example, in these buildings, we have less access to natural light on the lower floors, but these lower floors are much higher. So in a way, it leads to like better housings. And on the two like added floors, you have a low ceiling, but you have a large access to the light, and you have terraces because the building, like the added floor, are detached from like the front facade. Yeah, this is a view of the upper floor, like the added floors on the top. Yeah, was quite a discussion about these housings because it's only like two rooms, and it's super open on the terrace. Yeah. Yeah, this is picture from like this. Mainly on one side we have winter gardens, and on the other side we have these large terraces. So each facade has like one specific work and answer to the surrounding. Yeah, this is a view of the building from the surrounding. I don't know if you want to add something, but I think it's we said everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, and now it's time for the third presentation of this evening. Yes, you have boards. Great. Please welcome José Toral from Peris+Toral Arquitectes.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. I'm not sure if it's going to work because I tried to do the 25 meters, but I'll try, okay? We are an office, we are two partners, Marta Peris and, no, it is not working, sorry. Yeah, and José Toral, okay? So I'll speak about this building in Cornellà. To understand Cornellà, you know, this is, the cross is where we have the office in Barcelona. This is the city center. This is the old, you know, the Roman city. And, you know, this is, Cornellà, it's a town, but actually belongs to the metropolitan area of Barcelona, just to understand it, okay? So, and it's in this neighborhood that in the 60s was moving, they move people, and it's a very low income, it's full of these buildings, and it occupies a plot where there used to be a cinema. And you know, before the competition, the people were saying, Pisa sí, pisos no. It was saying because the cinema was called Pisa, and they wanted to still have the cinema, and they don't wanted to have the dwellings, okay? But I think now they allow us to be there. But the important thing is the income area, you know. This is the same city map of the metropolitan area of Barcelona, just showing, you know, the low income, you know, per habitat in the city, you know, and this is the poorest areas in the city. This is one of them, okay? They are around here, okay? Less than 1,000 per year. Okay, we did the competition, and we had the plot. The plot was this thing that we couldn't change the planning regulations, so we had to fit our building in this 50 by 40 plot, and it was compulsory to have this patio of 15 by 25. We nearly didn't do the competition because we thought there was no interest. But then we thought, well, what happened if we, instead of beginning, you know, from the city, We want to, what happens if we begin from the interior and try to do building with all equal rooms. And making all equal rooms, it's something that changes a lot many of the rules of a house, because when things are equal, they are easily changeable. And where things are equal, there is no hierarchy. You know, you don't have a room for the parents and a room for the kids. You know, they're all measured the same. And, you know, we thought it could be a way to answer to the new ways of living that we have after the COVID. No? So, but the big deal was which has to be the size of a room in order to be able to work as everything. You know, we wanted it to work as a kitchen, as a living room, as a dining room, no? So that's where we came up to here. So we had this reference, you know, the PhD of my partner, of Marta, was talking about the Japanese house from the cinema of Yasuhiro Ozu. And there is a very interesting thing that happens in Japan. They don't call the rooms by their use because they change the use during the day. So they call it by the size. So this is 8 tatami rooms. And as you can imagine, each tatami is the size of a person. So they relate the size of the room to the size of the people. So it's a room for 8 persons. And it measures 360 by 360. So what we did was to draw a matrix of spaces measuring 360 by 360, 114 per plan. Then we found out afterwards, a very funny thing, that one of the versions of Grete Lisowski's kitchen of Frankfurt was measuring 360 by 350, and then we found out that La Petite Cabanon of Le Corbusier was measuring 366 by 366. That's because of Le Modular. And then this is the matrix of our project. So we found out we can have the more flexible room we know, the more specific room, and the room of thinking of Le Corbusier all could fit in the matrix of our building. So at this point, we don't know which are the limits of the houses. We only have some intuitions. You know, maybe we will place kitchens and bathroom here because there would be no light. So, and there's another thing we were very obsessed was this idea of not working with the standard doors, with 80 centimeters doors. So work with this porosity of these rooms of the Japanese house, that the openings were around 1.60 m or 1.80 m, okay? Next. Okay. The planning, okay. In the ground floor, we decided to place this porch. And, you know, it was, you know, the planning told us to do it. And it was very important, this porch. And then we make another decision that is not, you know, we placed 4 cores of vertical cores. But instead of entering to them directly from the street, the decision was that all the neighbors should enter through the same door. So then, you know, this space, this patio, that has some bioclimatic character that we'll see now, the important thing is it's not only a bioclimatic space, it's a social space. It's a space that all the neighbors, they go there, they cross there, they give us identity to the community. You know, and there's an interesting thing. Another thing the regulations told us is that in this part of the building, this should be lower in order to have the same height of the neighbor. So by having here, you know, the porch and having this shadow, you know, south is coming from here. So normally we're very hot in Spain. So we have this space normally in shadow, and we have this space normally with the light, with the sun. So this part gets warm, so the warm air goes up and generates a movement of the air that is very important, to generate a microclimate here. And this movement of the air, when it passes through the vegetation, generates some humidity absorption. Then, we managed to do the least amount of basement. We did a parking with the middle levels in order to, and here we have a facility that was able to put a future cinema similar to the one that it used to be in the plot. Okay, so this is this idea of the porch. This is the facade of the building. We are in the porch, so we're going to enter. So this is from outside, and this is from the inside to the outside. The transparency was very important, not to be, for us it was very important to be close, because it gives, to work with this idea of different hierarchies of privacy, but it has to be more like a filter than like a fence. So we can see here all the transition, this is the different gradients of intermediate spaces. Here you're in the porch, but outside. Here you're in the porch, but inside the patio. Here you're in the patio, then you enter to the course, And in each one of these situations, as a user, you expect to meet different people. Okay, so for us it's important, this idea that your home is not beginning at your home door. It begins when you are there. You feel at home in every moment. So then we go up. Then we have this idea of the plan. The important thing of the plan is this idea of not being the indeterminacy. For us, it's a good news that when somebody sees the plan for the first time, it's very difficult to understand which are the limits between the different units, and even though the limits between the public space and the common areas. Okay, here we can see it more. So we have 4 cores, each one in one corner. Here, with 2 kinds of units. One, this aggregation, you enter to 4 dwellings per plan, and in this aggregation, you enter to 5 of them, okay? So you have 5 and 5, 4 and 4. So you get, in this common room, another room of 360 by 360 where the lift led you. The stair also fits in the same matrix, okay? And this is the only corridor that we have. So the important thing is that from here, you enter in a private terrace. So normally the houses, they have 2 terraces, So the one of the entrance and the one of the outside. So in the normal situation, have 6 modules. That is a 3 bedrooms. Thing we did, we put the dining room with the kitchen, so compensate the surface. Then here the living room, and then the 3 rooms. But important, this relation, these big openings. And in the middle we have the kitchens or bathroom. All the pipes are going through here. Here the same situation, and in the corners there are this situation, the 4 modules and a half, and 4 modules and a half, 2 rooms, 2 bedrooms. Another situation was 6 modules and a half because you have the lift, and here you have another 4, 5, 6 and a half, and another. This is another corner with 6 modules. This is all the corridor. This is the common area. And here, you see, this is the entrance of a house. So you are entering through the exterior space. This is a kind of a collage, kind to change the scale for us. It's the important, people are entering through the porch and, going to the lifts. But then for us, it's important these sequences of spaces, the porosity of the plan, ending to the room, to the corners, the importance for us to building the corners in order to help people to lay their furniture. And when you enter to the house, you have this porosity. This is a bedroom, but you lift, you see the exterior through the private spaces, And it's important not to see the end, not being able to see all the dwelling in one point of view, to have some things out of the plane. Okay, so the kitchen, the importance of the kitchen in the center of the house. That's what helps us to do a house without corridor. Placing the kitchen, visibilizes the domestic work. So it helps us to work against the role of gender, but also help us to do all the circulations through the dining room, and the kitchen becomes again the center of the house. And finally, even though these spaces, they measure 13 square meters, they are small, they have this porosity, these openings between them. You are in the kitchen, but you can see 4 spaces in one point of view. So the space looks bigger than it really measures because you use porosity in order to see through spaces through the bedrooms. Okay, talking about the facade, well, this is the idea of the intimicity. We have some bedrooms facing to the patio, and to do the solar protection here, we place this sheet of aluminum, perforated sheet, in order to give some privacy, but also to allow the air to move. But on the other hand, in the other face of the building, what we did is to put the solar protection in the outside part of the facade in order to generate a microclimate. That's important in Spain a lot. So all the decisions are made because of summer. We have a ventilated facade, so it doesn't get warm. The white color is not casual because it gets less warm. We let expose the ceiling of wood in order to regulate some of the humidity, and then we place these movable letters of wood in front of the windows, and these fixed fabrics in order to generate some microclimate in this space. And then this is a very important detail. We have around 3,000 square meters of mesh of hand dwelling, and it was very expensive to do all the protection. So what we did was we took this electro mesh that is very cheap, and instead of doing the welding, we just used the idea of folding, like Jean Prouvé used to do with his furniture, just with the idea of folding to give rigidity to the materials. You can see this on the outside, and maybe here you can see, so it gives some aesthetics, but also it makes it very cheap, so it costs 4 times less than a normal welding hand-weld solution. Okay, we go out. We can go up to the last level, the one that was lower because of the legislation, no? the regulations. And here we have this space for the neighbors. And then we'll talk about the wood construction. Okay, the building is made with wood because of, I think that the benefits of goods are very well known, but I go really fast. Okay, the main thing is that it's good for the community because when the tree is growing, it has the ability to absorb CO2, and then it transforms the CO2 in oxygen and keeps the carbon. And then if at the end of the life of a tree, if we let it burn or we let it degrade, it generates the same reaction in the way, other way around. So it liberates the CO2 to the atmosphere. So if we dry it and we use it as a material of constructions, we are keeping this CO2 as a material of construction. Another benefit is that if we let it expose, it has the ability to hygroscopic behavior, so it has the ability to regulate humidity in the interior space. And finally, for the constructor, it's very good because it's a very light material and we can go through it and you can build it really fast. So when we did the competition, we were thinking of this ideal structure, making all the crosses made with timber in order to generate, this image. Even we were thinking of letting all the structure exposed. But when we begin to understand how was to build with wood, the fire resistance was one of the main issues. No, there's two strategies to do fire resistance. In this building we need 90 minutes of fire resistance. That means that we have to be able to keep the building stand during 90 minutes. So one of the strategies is to allow some part of the wood to be burned. So each centimeter extra we put, we gain 30 minutes. So in the case of the slabs that we let them expose, we have 3 extra centimeters, 90 minutes. And the other possibility is to put plaster boards. So if you cover with each plaster board is around 30 minutes. So in this case, we use 2 plaster boards, and we put 1 extra centimeter in the CLT of the facade. But the theme is that we were able to do the slabs and do the facades, but in the middle crosses, that was very difficult because that meant that we needed to put 3 extra centimeters in each one of the sizes. So it was economically so much expensive. So that's why we decided to change the strategy into beams and pillars of glulam in the middle of the plan, because they are able to have the fire resistance without without putting extra material. Okay. Okay. And then I'm not sure I mentioned, it's a social housing. We had a very low budget to do it. So one of the things was to work a lot with the optimization of the structure. So just from the beginning of the competition, we took a room of 360, and then we thought, well, which is the deformation of a board if we use 2 supports? So it was around 6 millimeters. But if we made it continuous and we have 4 supports, so we compensate moments. This is a very boring lecture that we had in university, but it was useful in this case. The deformation can go to the half. And if we add the cantilevers, the deformation gets even lower. It's around 1 millimeter in the interior part. So that's how we needed at the beginning this more than 15 centimeters. So we built with we were able to use only 12 centimeters with the optimization of the compensation of the moments, the bending moments. And then we built with 15 centimeters in order to have the 3 extra centimeters we needed for the fire resistance. And for the pillars and the beams, we had to do the same, but we cannot have continuous beams, of all the length of the building. So we had to make joints. And you have to know that making joints with wood, it's very complicated not to be an articulation because they use scrolls, and it's very difficult to have an hyperstatic. So that's why making the joint in the support would have meant not to compensate moments. So the decision was to make the joints just here, where the moment is 0. That's, 1/5 of the distance between supports. So that's why we designed this piece. This is the clue of the building, is this metal piece that allows us, to have the continuity of the pillar, but in the other hand, the beam can pass through one of the sizes. It's 40 by 36, so it's 2 beams of 20 by 36. 20 is the standard width of a beam, of a glue-lined limb, in order to make finally this joint. Here you see the piece, this is the element. For us it's very important, this element, and this is the detail, you see how the beam is passing through, and the pillar is going through the same space where all the conducts are going through the building. So the final thing is that on the competition, we needed 0.5 cubic meters by square meter. But in the one that we built, having the same boards, having the same facade, only changing the interior part of the structure, we have 0.24 cubic meters by square meter. So it's less than the half. So I always say that even though building with wood is sustainable, building with half of the wood is more sustainable. And to finish, this velocity, this is a time lapse. This is each photo is 1 week. This is the first week. They begin a bit, not too fast because the difference of levels between concrete and wood are around 5 centimeters from one corner to the other. So they had to place they call it the wood in order to make the transition. So it's a bit slow at the beginning. So in 2 weeks, we made 1 floor. Then they go faster, 3 weeks. Now they are very much faster. Here, the important thing is that they begin to do the stairs. The stairs are made in one piece. These are the elements that allow the building to stand the wind. So it's very funny because the element that allows that it's there because of the wind, you cannot put it in the beginning because it will fall for the wind. So you need to have at least 2 slabs in order to have these towers sustainable. So here they build the towers, and here we have the 4 towers for the stairs in one piece, and then they begin going through here 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. In 2 months, you can stand this 5 stories structure. So it's really, really fast. And from the first month, they are working underneath because you don't have auxiliary elements. And this is it.
Thank you very much. That was the last lecture of this evening, and we will start the discussion. As I mentioned, you can ask questions via Slido or here, just by raising your hand. So please, gentlemen, join our discussion. Once again, thank you very much for great lectures. First question is about the source of energy, heating and electricity. All of these buildings are connected to the grid, is that right? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Thank you. The question about the last project we have seen, is there any program for the semi-public and public spaces? Like, do you say to people what they should place in front of their doors or in the public space?
No.
No.
No. It's not a cooperative. You know, in Barcelona, some of them are cooperatives, and we can negotiate that with the future users. But in this case, the competition didn't ask any new ways of living or anything of this. That's why we only put the common spaces on places that we know they will work surely. That, you know, in the entrance, sharing the entrance, you know, it's a very good place to share because, you know, everybody passes through and, you know, it's easy to, and it gives more security to the community. And, you know, you need some relations, and we think that the future of the architecture has a lot to do with sharing, and we have to learn how to share better.
Thank you. I would like to ask if there is, we have seen buildings that are, I don't want to say, not alternative, but they are modern, they are contemporary. And do you have some, do you have in these cities, Berlin, Paris, Barcelona, some standards that you know that you have to provide, like balconies, these semi-public spaces? Is there something, some tradition you put in these projects?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for the German side, and I always wonder, is there any standard that we do not have? And we're not talking of tradition. I mean, I think they're two different things. I think we're ultimately working, I mean, again, you know, I can say that from Berlin and half of the practice being from Latin America, I do have an inside and an outside in a way, but like we do work with like a framework that is sometimes beyond comprehension, and so very strict setups in terms of everything. So I think one of the debates in Germany, and that might be very different from any other debate, is like actually how to lower standards, and we're not able to do so.
For me, I don't know if it's traditional to have balcony or to have terrace, but for me it's really important to have balcony and to have terrace because we build building for people who live inside. So I don't know. So for me the question is why we stop to build balcony and to build terrace and to build many things for the people. So now I think it's really important to have this question and to build building with really good quality for inhabitants. I think it's really important.
Yeah, but we have seen that the building of RATP was close to classical building that we know from Paris. Was there any reaction or dialogue between those buildings, or were you focused just on the building that you were trying to convert?
It's not exactly a typical Parisian style, so, I know, but I think
not a critic.
No, yeah, but I understand. For me, we are in part of Paris where you have Mobilier National, who was built by Auguste Perret. It's not really typical Parisian still. You have Tour Alberts. It's a really interesting building in with with the facade still. So I think there is no real Parisian still in this area. For me and for us, it was really important to create a building for the people who live inside. So we have problem with the industrial seat. So we need to create architectural answer for the people. So we create winter garden, and on the street we can create a terrace. So we create a terrace. So I think this building have an answer for its situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jose.
No, okay. In our case, the legislation, the regulations in Spain or in Barcelona, they're not too good, because we can do bedrooms from 6 square meters, the double ones 8 square meters, and the main ones 10 square meters. So the way we did 13 square meters rooms, it's because we didn't do corridors. Because the measurement of the house is the same as the standard one. It's not bigger than, but by doing this, there are people that are thinking of how to change regulations, But I think it always goes after architecture. We, as architects, we have to look for the opportunities. That's what you said, I have to do a setback, there is a terrace. No, yeah. There's an opportunity, I have to take it. So as an architect, you're very curious for the opportunities that they occur. In our case, the opportunity was that they wanted to sell them, so there was very important the ratio of the. So all our effort was to make the best ratio. It's around 85% between what they sell and the global building ratio. So we take that as an advantage in order to change the way of living.
Thank you. There is a question about the low-budget projects. You mentioned that your budget was not very high. Is there, in these kind of low-budget projects, is there any design process or discussion about beauty and aesthetic of the building?
Okay. In our office, to do low budget, the main thing, we are very worried about the amount of facade of the building, because the facade is the most expensive part. So when we do competitions, we try to do very deep solutions in order to make them cheaper. This is not one of the deeper that we do, but this is one of the strategy. And I was going to say something, but I forgot. No, but the problem of the budget, we take it in consideration in all the decisions. The budget, and the aesthetic. You question because we try to reduce the amount of layers. So if we are able to do it with less layer, it would be more sustainable, but at the same time, it would be more economic, and it will give you some aesthetics. So that's, we in some way, we take the aesthetics of the simplicity of the solutions. That's, I think, all of us, we do it.
Thank you. Is there any question from the audience? Anyone? You will have a chance. Okay. No? I wanted to ask about the project of the conversion of era type building, because you had construction that was there for many years. And what is the life cycle of these constructions? When you put away the old facade and everything from the building, did you find out that the construction is still healthy and you can use it for a building, or did you had to some repairments and everything, or anything?
So at the beginning, we need to realize a diagnostic, precious diagnostic, because as the law says, we need to create a building, and the program go inside the building. It's totally different. If you have a new building, when we work on a new building, we have a program and we design a building around the program. So when you have an existing building, like this project in Paris, it's another approach, totally different. So after you have this diagnostic, you can say, oh, the facade are not really interesting because you have many problems with. At the beginning, it's for an office, and now you need to create houses, so you need to open the window, and in this office you can't open the window. So this is the first problem you have, and so you say, okay, we remove this facade, and after you have the structure. The structure is really important, and you need to have a reflection about the foundation, and it was our problem. So this is a question why we need to build this building as light as possible, because we need to create 50% area in more, and we need to stay in the same rate. So it was really complex. So we choose the structure, metal structure, because we can have the largest dimension for the columns, for the beam, and to create the new surface. So it was all the time a discussion with engineers and architects and clients, and we need to adapt program, structure, existing building, and all the time you need to have a choose. What do you prefer, this or this? And you are like a referee. So you choose, you take, okay, I take this one, or I take this one. You can't have all. It's impossible in an existing building.
You mentioned the issue of the noise, but what about the vibrations? Because there's still working train depot beneath the building.
It's an industrial seat. So you have many train all the time. So in the existing building, it was an office for the people who work here. So now you decide to create a new building for inhabitants, for the workers who live here. So it's impossible to say, oh, you have noise, it's not a problem. So, because you have noise all the time in the night, because they repair the train in the night. They start at 5 or 4 in the morning, and they finish at 22. So you need to have this to find an answer to this problem. So this is a reason why we create a kitchen near the facade and winter garden. At the beginning, the clients say, "Oh no, it's impossible. No, I don't like that. I prefer to have a kitchen either." And it was exactly the same thing when we choose to install the corridor near the facade. They say, "Oh, it's impossible. No, we don't do that. Never." Now they say all the time on Twitter, "Oh yes, look, we have a good idea." Now, you understand? During 5 years, they say, "Nothing, never, we do that." And now they say, "Oh yes, it's our idea."
We know that very well from planning of the cities. So any questions here? Yes, great. Welcome to camp.
Hello, thank you for this wonderful presentation for you all. I have one question about, maybe you can mention how much each of your building would cost, for example, per square meter. And the second question is maybe for the first project. I would like to ask about the detail of concrete slab coming from outside to inside, how you solved it, and yeah, thank you.
Money?
Okay.
Speak about the money.
Okay.
Well,
the important thing is with the benefit of the contractor.
I think you speak about your fees. No?
Yeah, no. Okay, the cost with the benefit of the contractor, it's less than 1,000 euros per square meter. It's 980.
Well, I mean, I can mention an euro number, which is including fees and so on, 1,500 per square meter. But I don't think it means very much because the economies are different in different places. So I would be relational in terms of social housing in Berlin, as far as that exists, is I would say 15 to 20% more expensive. So and that's like public housing bodies. And they are shoeboxy and so on. So there's like minimum heights, minimum that. So I do think there is something to be argued for very low construction costs, but I think the cost needs to be discussed in relationship to architectural qualities, longevity, and so on, because otherwise I would, you know, I mean, I'm not saying that you are implying that, but for me, we find ourselves defending our, you know, defending architectural positions, and I do think we're not in a business seminar in that, so, but we're talking about certain architectural qualities that you get for that. To your other question is, it's a really relevant one. It just never goes outside, really. I mean, there's only, basically, the building has, let's say, 7 bays, 6 of them are warm, and the facade is in front of it, and the last bay is cold, and we kept it very simple, that there's like one simple and single line where you separate, and there the concrete is actually, as a precast concrete piece, has like it's a sandwich. It comes with concrete and insulation in the middle.
But not in the second.
Say what?
Not in the second building.
No, in the second one, you know, exactly. It's like, and that is like a holy grail in construction, and it's cold in Berlin in the winters, and there's like one. Everything, as I mentioned before, it tends to be super complicated and complex, but there's one simple detail you can do. I don't know, for some reason nobody does, but you can put insulation flanking the piece for 1 meter, and then it counts as being separated inside and outside. It works thermically. And most people try to avoid that because they think it's ugly. I think it's actually pretty gorgeous. And so it's a very simple, it's a very trivial approach to it.
Okay, answering org is the same cost as the standard social housing. So it's more expensive than them.
So for us, it's a social project. So I can say the price. It was 1,900 square meters, but it was 5 years ago. So today I think it's impossible to do that for 2 things. I think the first thing is when we built this building, the transformation of building it's not really famous in Paris. So the company don't know exactly what is the price. So this is the first problem. Now they know. And the second part is you are in Paris and the prices are really high today. So I think today it's really impossible to build this building with this price. And I can say when you work on existing building, it's all the time more expensive. Because traditionally, the company builds the price on their method, and when you work on existing building, you need workers. You don't have a machine, or you don't have, so you need more people who build the building, because all the time you have a new situation. So at the end, it's more expensive. But for the planet, I think it's another thing. So you need to choose.
Okay. Any reaction? No?
Well, I was just like talking about an economy because you had a question that was relating to economy, and there's something interesting. I think also. I mean, there was certain other times in history where pre-construction had other connotations, but at this point in time, I do think, to some degree, at least from my experience, that there's certain construction economies where it actually makes sense to pre-construct, to kind of do serial construction. Germany being one, because labor cost is very high. There's a huge labor shortage, and there is actually an infrastructure that was built up in the former eastern part of Germany that actually provides that. So it makes things, from our experience, substantially cheaper. From our, being half of a Chilean office, we would never do that. You know, because like there was like, you know, when we built the first project, there was like two kind of salaries. The guys who could weld and the guys who couldn't weld was 8 or 20 euros a day. And that was like, so everything is, labor is super cheap. So there's a very different construction economy. And their pre-construction becomes just an image of itself. So I do think all of these things need to be looked at in relationship to a specific material and labor economy. And then they start to make sense.
Thank you. About the wooden structure of the the public spaces and semi-public stairs and the cores you showed us, 4 cores of the building. What about the life cycle of these spaces? Is there something that you have to be changed in the future earlier than the parts from the flats of the of the people who live there? Because, for example, stairs, people use them together. Is there any chance that they will have to be changed in the future?
No, the steps are massive. You know, they are 20 centimeters.
Yeah, you mentioned they are from one piece, the stair.
Yeah, no, we built it from the outside, and you know they are mass to 20 centimeters stairs. It's very funny because we built it the same way we used to do it in the university.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making the wood one with some overlapping, you know.
Yeah, we are talking about what's possible and not possible in Czech Republic. In Germany, France, there are same restrictions for the wooden construction, because in Czech Republic it's not possible to make this residential building from wood with the wood structure. It's not possible. It's against the law. So are these restrictions same in all countries? Is it possible to build the building that Jose showed us in other countries?
It is possible in Barcelona.
In Barcelona, yes, but Paris and Berlin?
I think we have another restriction, but we can build in wood. There is no problem.
Okay, great.
But for me, when I see his building, I say, oh, look, the stairs are in wood. In France, probably you say it's impossible to have the stair in wood. But
why is that? Is that a standard I mentioned before?
It was a discussion with the security, with firemen. So I don't know exactly, but you can build in wood. So I show you a project. It's a tower, and this tower is in wood, but we have all the stairs are in concrete. So I don't know exactly why the firemen in Spain or in France are a different approach, because the fire is the same fire. But I don't know exactly.
The difference that in Spain, all of the stairs have to go to the outside.
Yeah.
You cannot put them in the middle of the plan. You know, they all have to have openings, so then the temperature cannot go that high. I don't know. But you know, it's as you said, we have to do the negotiation with the firemen, and then they have to say, we allow you to do this.
I invite you to Paris to discuss with the firemen, and we can explain exactly that. For me, it's cool.
Maybe you can try it. And what about Berlin, Germany?
The code has been changing over the last couple of years. So it was more difficult. There was like up to, I don't know, 5 levels or so. By now, that's different. So it's an ongoing process in a way as the materiality or the building system develops.
We mentioned wooden constructions. We have seen that the process was very fast, the process for construction. It's made of prefabricated parts, as I guess. We have seen the prefabrication of concrete. Prefabrication buildings, concrete prefabrication buildings has quite this bad reputation in countries like Czech Republic or Eastern Germany, former Eastern Germany. Are there any advantages for users who live in prefabricated buildings that we can say, okay, this is the advantage, like these buildings, they're great. There is an obvious advantage. What is the advantage for a user of these buildings?
One tiny correction in the German reputation, it is in the very west of the country that they have a terrible reputation because they remind people of the east, of the idea.
Yeah, sorry,
of the
you mentioned
east.
that.
So there is like, so, but that's to our internal tensions. But that being said, yeah, I mean there is the fastness, there is the cost. Then I do think really. How we start thinking about construction, and I was trying to get that across from my eyes, because we're talking about an increasing differentiation about how we want to live, work. For the last 3 years, we don't just live, we live, work, or everything gets combined. And I do think as you start like thinking about a skeleton structure, and it's not by definition prefabricated, but oftentimes prefabricated now. Then you kind of develop a certain resilience within the structure that has a long-term ability to adjust in a way. So I do think that's like one of the large advantages, and from a perspective of housing, you can actually move in quick. I mean, there's a fast pace, and the first one I was showing is like 1 floor per week, and on the large construction it's like 3 weeks per floor. So there's a certain economy to making it happen.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, I will ask for a microphone. Here. Yeah. Thank you very much. Welcome to camp.
Thank you. It's maybe a little funny and specific question, but it bothers me when I go to sleep as an architect. What do you think about the rise of artificial intelligence? And if you consider us and architects, are we going to make it as a tool in, let's say, 5 to 10 years, or are we going to become overrun by it and get extinct like dinosaurs? Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, I have an answer. No. Okay. Actually, we are beginning to use it in the office, so it's not a thing of 10 years. So I think it's something, but for me, the best thing of artificial intelligence is that during many years we have been expert of solving problems, of getting the answer of the things. And now we are in a situation where there is a machine that is able to solve things for us. And then we became, in some way, gods, that we make the question. So the clue is that with artificial intelligence, we still are part of the problem. We are the question. We are not the answer, we are the question. So when you work with artificial intelligence, the key is the question. So you have to try many questions in order to get the good answer. So the potential is huge, but we're still part of it. It's not something that you press the button. Pressing the button, you don't get anything. But the way you interact is not answering. So there was a sentence that it was in Spanish, but I tried to translate it, that, changing the answer is evolution, changing the question is revolution. So I think we are in a revolution.
Thank you.
Okay. My opinion. The first thing is, I think I like to design a building. So I don't like to press a button to have a building. So I don't really understand why some people press a button to have a building, or I don't know exactly what they want. So if they want to do that, okay. Me, I like that. It's my passion all the time. So I don't really understand why we do that. The second thing is, I think computer, intelligence artificial is a tool. So you can use a tool, but after, if this tool removes the human, I think we don't have sense in your life. So for me, we need to use these tools like a tool. So I'm not really stressed by this intelligence artificial, because at the end, I think we think it's not a good idea. And The other thing is this program is designed by some people, and I don't know these people. So I prefer to have my reflection about a building, not a Google thing, or not, I don't remember the name of Facebook, the Mark Zuckerberg thing. I don't like that. I prefer my idea. You understand?
Okay, your opinion?
I'll keep it very short. I've been working as I practice, but I also teach and research at university, and we're doing a research project for the last 2.5 years on an AI kind of integrated in the process actually of reusing existing structures. I do see and I do understand that there's all sorts of fears related to it, and naivete would also be out of place, I think. But I also wonder, the discipline of architecture is always one of trying to achieve a maximum of control. I wouldn't say total, but that's kind of how our self-definition actually works. Right? You described it. Our fear is always that someone takes our control, that being a client, a developer, and so on. It's always close to evil, right? And the interesting things about AI, and that's why I think it projects so much fear in our discipline, is because, it is by definition a lose control, because, even those people developing it you can't trace what's actually going on. It's the ultimate machine of losing control in a certain way. Long story short, I don't see a reason to be totally afraid. I see in any case, like many things in the first couple of technological revolutions or industrial revolutions, they have changed the discipline. And I think it's our role to somehow stay relevant and on top of it. So it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be very interesting, I think.
Great, thank you. This answer led me to the question on Slido about the control and communication with clients and possibilities according to budget. What ideas do you regret that were not realized in the buildings you mentioned? What was not possible according to the budget or according to opinion of client? What you would add to a building if you can?
Okay, in the competition, we cover all the patio with an atrium, and it was a very good solution because we didn't need any active system, so we could do the building without any heating. But the problem was that the developer was just too much worried because it was made of wood, so he didn't want to do it without wood and with wood and without system. So then a very important part of the budget was in the system. So, but we kept with the atrium until we make some analysis of the acoustics, and it has the proportion of a pavilion, and the reverberation was 4 seconds. That was not admissible, and we didn't have the money to put the absorbers that we needed. So if we, and it was not making sense making that machine because they will have the system. So we decided not to do it.
What I regret? I regret when we work on this building, it was our first reflection about the existing building, and we designed this building like a new building. So everything was really precise. So we don't have any limit, and sometimes we have some details are horrible today. So this is a regret. Now when I design in an existing building, I take more. I say it's not really 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters. I take more dimension for. And the second thing is, I think we choose. How you say label? You know what is it? Comment on dit label? Certification, maximum acoustic. I don't know why we choose this, and I think it's not a good idea because the columns are in steel, and now you have plaster near the columns, and for me it's really horrible because you are really thin column in steel, and now you are big plaster columns. So we choose this certification, and today I say why we choose this one. I don't really understand. This is a discussion with the client, and they say, we take this one, and they say, yes, and we don't know. So it's tragic.
Thank you for the answer. And you, Marc?
Well, it's a tricky one. You could ask me on any other project, and I would give you a long laundry list of regrets. I think, here it's a little bit difficult because I've also been the client, so I would regret my other half in a way, which is a schizophrenic exercise. I think, for me, has always been I would have always argued I would never build for myself. I mean, I think because also like in the way we operate as a design practice, is always we try to get into a little bit of a not a fight, but like kind of a certain tension that that is at the heart of our work. And so I do think it was a rather drastic exercise to be the not the punching bag, but the kind of counter in that process. So it left some bruises, but altogether, there's not too many different choices I would make different on either side of the role game.
Thank you. Any last question? Yes. Welcome to camp.
I would have a question on the communal spaces, which were included in many of the projects. Are there any mechanisms in place that would ensure that the places actually get used, or does it mostly just rely on the people to decide how to use it and whether to use it? Because I feel, especially with larger projects, people might be hesitant to use these places, which would be occupied by many people they do not know. Thank you.
Well, it's a very important question. As I say before, we have to learn how to share. So maybe in the future we'll have some apps that will help us to share better. So now we do it the best way we do, but we cannot be sure that they work. In the other projects that we are working with the cooperatives, we are very sure they will work because we work with the users, and that ensures that these spaces will work. In our case, the idea of the hub, of this patio, of the entrances, we have tested in many projects, and it always works. But there are others that generate some conflicts, and we have to see.
On this project, we don't have many columns, so we have only the entrance, so they can speak about the later. But no, we don't have many.
Okay.
One space.
This discussion is part of our exhibition that is focused on residential crisis and solutions of it, how city should approach. Do you think that prefabrication, filling gaps in the city, density of the city, wooden constructions, and, for example, conversion of buildings, do you think that these are all tools we have according to the finding ways how to sustainable increase the capacity of the city, or there are something else we should add to our discussion? If you would like to invite another guest, another approach, what is it? What is another possibility of the city, how to increase its density and how to find a new capacity for residential buildings?
In our office, we think that the future has to do with sharing. We're doing a cooperative that when we did the first plan, we can only do 4 dwellings per plan of 45 square meters. But then we did another version and we could enter 5 units of 30 square meters and a communal space of 50. So that means that each one of the users can have 80 square meters, so nearly the double on the first version, and you have more users. So we see a lot of potential there, just to understanding the, in this case, we share kitchens and living rooms, and then we have a personal space like a loft of 30 square meters, and we have bathroom is private, but kitchen is communal, and then thinking of different scales of sharing. In this case, they share by 4, by 5. It's like a student flat that we have many in Barcelona, and then they also have communal spaces in the ground floor. So for us, this is a way of putting more density, just designing with this concept of sharing things. And also, you don't need to put that many electrodomestics in the house. They have this obsolescence that they make a lot of waste. So we think like share is the key the key concept for the future.
Any other opinions?
Well, I can say, I was very happy to see your project and you presenting your project, because I do think, to me, if we want to talk about certain aspects of sustainable further development, I think it's not so much a question in which material we build. I'm not saying that it's not a relevant aspect, but ultimately it's the question like how we build less and still provide those things we need. Ultimately the key point separating architectural production, as designing from the material consumption as much as possible. And I do think, our build stock of what we have is, we need to kind of develop different views and different views on that. And we need to develop further tools to kind of be able to read them and let them re-accommodate our needs and so on. I think that's where the discipline, that also touched on your question, what AI can do for you. There you go, amongst many other things. So I do think, to me, the critical questions are, and again, I keep on repeating, but like friends of mine from Chile come and they keep on wondering, why are they tearing this building down in Berlin? It's perfectly good. There's nothing I can say. Yes, you're right. And large parts of the truth about how we densify is ridiculous. I mean, at least from the context that we operate in, is like we tear down things for a certain kind of increase and on surplus on area. But ultimately, I do think separating architectural production from material consumption, there is no way around from my perspective.
Thank you.
I'm really optimistic for our position for architects, because I think we are central and we can discuss with many people. So me, and this is, and I explain that to my students, our job is central for the future. I'm sure. The second thing is now I think in France, I don't know, but we need to build the city on the city. So we have many questions about materials, about structure, about buildings, about program, about many things. And all the things change now. The climate, our life, many things. And our position, our job is in a central position. We can discuss with engineers, we can discuss with politics, we can discuss with inhabitants, we can discuss with the worker, we can discuss with the construction company, we can discuss with many people. And I think we have the solution. We have many solutions. And I think it's a good period for us, even if it's sometimes a little hard. But I think it's a good period. We have a future, I think.
Okay, that's it. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of camp. Thank you very much. If you will be interested, you will find the lecture on our website and YouTube channel. So subscribe and follow us. Good night.